It's been more than a month since Washington and Tehran agreed to a ceasefire, but in that time, the truce has been constantly tested as the two sides have continued to trade fire in the Strait of Hormuz, the vital waterway which remains all but closed. For more on what's next, I'm joined by a top analyst who has studied the Islamic Republic for most of his career. Dani served as the head of Iran's branch of the Iran branch of Israel's military intelligence. He is now a senior researcher at the Tel Aviv-based Institute for National Security Studies. Always great to have you on, Dani. Let me ask you, at this point, you've just heard, I'm sure, that the Iranians have said they have responded to the American proposal. Do you think that response is going to move this forward? I mean, who's the person really who has to move here, Iran or the United States?
Thank you, Freud, for inviting me. Definitely is the U.S. The ball is in the U.S. court because of the fact there is no much room in the Iranian eyes for compromises. Now, they're demanding lifting of the naval blockade. They want to negotiate first and foremost the condition to end the war, and only then to negotiate on the nuclear issue. And it goes straight to your column, saying that the U.S. administration need to decide whether he wants to topple this regime, and then you have to return back to war, a serious war, lengthy war, or you want to compromise with the regime, but then he has to show compromises in a way that he has to accept some of the Iranian demands. So I think it's all could tend back to the White House, to the president, and what he will decide eventually will tell us whether we are going to escalation or some sort of a compromise and agreement.
Do you think that we are now witnessing the Iranians really flex their muscles on the weapon that they have, which is the Strait of Hormuz? I noticed yesterday they put out an announcement saying countries that are enforcing sanctions against Iran, those ships might not be allowed to get through the Strait of Hormuz, even if there is a deal. So in other words, they are trying to use this new weapon they have to actually reverse the sanctions that have been in place for decades.
Definitely, you're absolutely right. The Iranian wants to utilize Hormuz Straits for two main reasons. One is to get compensation for the attack, so they're going to charge every tanker that crosses the straits. This is one. And second, of course, they want to utilize that in order to create cracks within the sanction regime that U.S. imposed on them. And this is something they're not going to change. Unfortunately, we have to remember one other thing. The situation in Hormuz Straits is very unstable. So even if President Trump will decide not to decide, meaning is not going to compromise or return back to war, eventually friction will lead to escalation. Because I think that from the Iranian standpoint, they won't accept the status quo. And in terms of when they come to the junction between capitalization or escalation, they will always choose escalation. The blockade, even if it will be effective, it won't lead to Iranian surrender.
So let's talk about what the shape of a deal could look like. I want to first ask you, it does seem like the American side, from what we're hearing, has completely dropped the issue of the ballistic missiles that Iran has, the support for Hezbollah and Hamas. Those were the big criticisms of the Obama nuclear deal, that it didn't include those issues. And my understanding is the Trump administration is not even proposing to discuss those either.
I will say that bluntly. There are not going to be any agreement with the Iranians if President Trump will insist on limitation on missiles and on proxy aid by the Iranians. It's not going to happen. For the Iranians, those are the pillars of the regime itself, and it's a basic of their security doctrine, and they're not going to forgo that. So if President Trump wants an agreement, again, any agreement probably be a problematic one, but looking at the other options that he has, maybe that's the best option. But any agreement will be focused on two main things only. One is the control of the straits, and second, the right to Iran to enrich. Everything that is connected to missiles or proxies, the Iranians will want willing to negotiate. Same thing as the JCPOA, and then we'll ask ourselves, what is really the difference between what we're having now and the JCPOA?